Hey, I want to thank you for being a part of the conversation. Let's do it. Let's play it forward. These are real people with real stories. The struggle to play it forward. Episode number 621 is with Stephen Gaines, the author of the new book, All You Need Is Love, The Beatles in Their Own Words.
Hey, Harold, good. How are you doing?
Fantastic. I'm so glad that you picked this photograph for the front cover. And the reason being is that's how I was introduced to the Beatles at a young age. I was peering through these beads on the wall, and my cousin had a picture of the Beatles with hair in their face. I had no idea who they were as a kid, but I knew they were rock and roll, and it went against my religion. But I didn't get to discover them until they were solo performers.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because we had 10 different kinds of covers on for these. And then we decided that we should use a cover that the way they looked while these interviews were being done. These interviews were all done in 1980, except for Yoko. So we decided to use that. And the English edition has the same photos on it, except the English edition, interestingly, is called The End of the Beatles. All You Need Is Love, The End of the Beatles. So, which I think is more to the point, but that's England for you.
What I like about this book is how intimate it is because, I've read the Rolling Stone magazine stories. I've read everything out there, but this one right here feels like that you've invited me to come to your place.
Thank you. I think that's true. I think that, it was me and a tape recorder. And instead of interviewing them and asking them details about music and stuff, we had conversations about life. And so I think that these interviews are very different and much more interesting about the Beatles than it would be just a musicology of them. So, and I loved Paul, and Ringo was adorable. And I liked all the people involved except for maybe Magic Alex. And I'm still mixed about Yoko.
Oh my God. My favorite story about Ringo Starr is he was in town with the All-Star Band and he was playing ping pong with Joe Walsh, and we walked by and he just gives you that smile of his and you go, oh my God, okay, I can die now. I've just, felt something that I've always dreamed about.
It's true. There's some people when you see when I first met John Lennon, when I was supposed to interview John Lennon, I was so flustered that it was John Lennon. I couldn't get it out of my mind and get the right words out. I was studying his face, and so I asked him a stupid question. I asked him if it made him feel old. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was going to be a Broadway show called On the Road. And he came to rehearsals one day to speak to journalists, and I waited online. And when I got up to him, I said, "Does it make you feel old to see this show going on the road?" And he said to me, "That's a dumbest question. I don't need that to make me feel old, mate." And he kind of pushed me out of the way and got the next writer. Oh, so that was my big shot with John. So
Beatles fans need to know that this is not the typical book about the Beatles. It is very, very different. Did you have to put a lot of energy into that, or is it that you remain so faithful and so disciplined to stay true to those tapes?
Well, I used the tapes to write the first book, Love Is All You Need. Gee, I keep on getting mixed up with the titles, but I used them, and we took out sentences, the information and all the rest, and then we locked the tapes in a bank vault for 40 years. Wow. These tapes were never heard. And then finally, Peter Brown, my partner, and I said, look, we've got to get them out. We've got to, just let's do all of them. And let's just let everybody speak, except for how's the weather and would you like more coffee? We cut those things out. But otherwise, we just let everybody speak. We started with about, I think, 200,000 words. And we had to cut it down to 100,000 words. But it's amazing to hear this straight. See, it's different. When you hear Paul McCartney saying this and it's coming out of his mouth, or Yoko, and these are actually Yoko's words, and you hear the interaction, sometimes it's chilling. It's really amazing. So, yes, it took a lot of discipline the first time around, but this time it was just a matter of editing and transcribing, and I knew what was important 40 years later.
I've been blessed with the opportunity to be with Yoko, and it's one of those things where I kept telling myself inside my head, don't treat her like you're a groupie. How did you get beyond that part where you started asking honest-to-God questions that were about them as the person and not them that everybody else already knew?
Well, first of all, I had Peter Brown, and Peter Brown, of course, was with them from Liverpool on.
Yeah.
He introduced Paul to Linda. He was best man at John and Yoko's wedding. He kept the Beatles' passports locked in his desk drawer. He introduced me to them and paved the way. So I didn't have to ask them all the regular questions and the groovy questions. I could speak to them on a different level, which I did. And we had conversations instead of interviews. And I didn't ask them much about the music. I asked them about the interpersonal relationships and how things came about and why, of course, the Beatles broke up. So Yoko, I spoke to after John was killed. So that was a very, very different interview than the rest. And but I knew a lot. Yoko was about the last interview that I did. Wow. So I knew a lot by the time I spoke to Yoko. And I had dates and things. And she was kind of squirmed a little because, a lot of things went on between John and Yoko that the public didn't know about and that affected the group.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I love about this, I don't call them ex-wives, I call them just chapters of their lives. You include them inside this story, which to me is so personal because I want to know about their life, not just their music.
Well, my favorite, by the way, I like Linda very much. Paul invited me to his house, to his summer house, his country house, rather, back then. And I got to know Linda just that afternoon. Well, we were there overnight, but that afternoon I got to know Linda really well. She was sweet. She was okay. But I also thought that she was kind of manipulative and knew what she was doing. I felt the same thing about Yoko. I mean, John absolutely weaponized Yoko to use against Paul and the rest of the Beatles. So it was easier for me having had 10 years pass from the time they broke up to the time that I wrote The Love You Make. So I didn't have to ask them musical questions. I could ask personal questions about their life and stuff. For instance, Yoko told me that she and John didn't sleep together for the first 3 months of their relationship.
Oh, wow.
And when I mentioned that to Peter Brown, my partner, he said, oh, it was much longer than that. So what that meant to me was that they really had an intellectual and emotional compact. They liked each other and loved each other on a different level than just a sexual level. And that was really very important to me. Of course, she was much older than him at the time. She was 8 years or 9 years older than him. So I was able to get into those kind of issues and conversations with them, the ex-wives, and with the Beatles themselves. Yeah. Ringo was adorable. Ringo was wonderful, wonderful to talk to. And he had his own opinions. He liked Alan Klein, who many people feel was a villain that helped destroy the Beatles. But he still liked Alan Klein. He had his own ideas about things, Ringo.
Wow. It's books like this that tell my heart that they're never going to be gone, even though, history has said that we've lost George Harrison and John Lennon. But it's through books like this that they continue to live inside of our lives. And in this streaming world, you give it to the next generations so that they, too, can have the whole story and not just a lyric.
I think you're right, and I'm very proud of that. And I think that nobody will ever forget the Beatles. We haven't forgotten Mozart.
Right.
We haven't forgotten, I could just go on and on, Tchaikovsky, but even more than those people, because these are so available, the Beatles music and songs. And I really think that this book, All You Need Is Love, is it's not the final word. Everybody's going to write another book about the Beatles' luggage and about this or that. But if you really want to know what was going on inside their heads and inside their lives, I think this book does it. This book tells it.
Wow.
It's all their own words.
Wow.
It's all their own words.
Please come back to this show anytime in the future. The door is always going to be open for you.
That's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Okay, thank you.